Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark LaLiberty, and joining me today is
Corey, Hairflip Knockriner.
This is definitely the episode to not watch on YouTube if you happen to be a YouTube watcher.
Yeah, that's going to make no sense to anyone listening to audio only.
For those just listening to
Corey
audio,
needs a haircut.
channeling his inner Backstreet Boy right now. But anyways.
No, the emo goth kid, remember on South Park?
Yes.
Emo kid? He's my favorite.
On today's episode, we'll discuss another recent attack from the folks at Lazarus. After that, we will go into an analysis of a malware campaign leveraging GitHub to deliver malware to 1 million endpoints.
Malvertising.
Yes. Yay. We will end with a research post on a brand new, just invented way to target any browser extension in the Chromium ecosystem. With that, let's go ahead and, wave our... No, that doesn't make sense. Let's just get started again.
You don't want to hair flip our way in?
No, that was what was coming out, and thankfully I stopped it. So let's start this week with a story from, I'm not even going to be sarcastic. You know what? I will put them as my third least favorite nation-state threat actor group. I've got two more that I dislike more than them. But let's start with a story from North Korea, where last week there was a blog post from a company called Socket. They're a software supply chain company. I hadn't heard of them. Maybe some of our listeners had, but they basically went through and described 6 new malicious NPM packages that they'd linked to North Korea's Lazarus group. NPM meaning Node Package Manager. That's the JavaScript package repository that is the most favorite used by JavaScript developers. They mentioned at the start of their report that linking it directly to Lazarus was actually really difficult. But some of the a lot of the TTPs closely align with known operations from Lazarus. They pointed to things like the logical obfuscation techniques and the tooling observed were all used in previous Lazarus campaigns. They words are hard today. Cross-platformed targeting of Windows, Mac, and Linux, which is a common trend for Lazarus. Specific malware backdoors they were using, like Beaver Tail and Invisible Ferret, which, pausing for a second, like that's, who named these? Are these gifts from Microsoft or someone else? Because it's, I don't know, Invisible Ferret doesn't exactly strike fear in my heart.
I don't know, man. I wouldn't want an invisible ferret running around my house. I've owned a ferret. They're little pains in the butt. They get everywhere and they can be naughty. So an invisible one would be definitely a pain in the butt.
Okay, fair enough. Either way, there wasn't a smoking gun pointing to Lazarus, but there was enough overlap with previous activity they'd analyzed that they felt pretty strong about that. So this analysis was on 6 specific packages they found. One called isBuffer validator. There was a UJA validator. There's an array empty validator, which I don't know why you need an entire package to validate whether a JavaScript array is empty or not. That feels like a pretty easy thing to do. And then a couple of other validators and dependency mapping tools, all of which were mimicking actual widely used packages. Like the isBuffer validator mimics one that Socket's own CEO actually created called isBuffer, which has 30 million weekly downloads or something. So they're all designed to look like something legitimate. And
so it sounds like the validator is the new part. Just to remind the audience, we've had 2, I think last year we had 2 times NPM was used to kind of do supply chain attacks. Mm-hmm. One of them was a research group found out that if a developer stops or decides to abandon a particular package and delete it, they can jump on the exact name of that npm package right away and take it over with a malicious one. That's a harder one but the other time it was just common misspellings, packages that looked really close. So this is more like packages that look close. And am I right in guessing that
Yep.
the validator being added is the part that will show you this is the bad one, because the normal one's called is buffer without that?
Yeah, and it's tough to tell what their exact strategy was since we didn't see any of these actually like delivered to would-be victims or developers. Like I think there's two different ways they potentially could have weaponized these. So like the typo squatting, or at least a common name, where if a developer goes to search for is buffer and finds is buffer validator, they may unintentionally include that in their package. The other one I could think of was like these could have been like staged packages to be used in other supply chain attacks. So like let's say Lazarus is going after like a cryptocurrency wallet platform, which is a common type of attack they do. Maybe that wallet somewhere in its dependencies uses the is buffer package, and Lazarus has found a way to instead replace that with their malicious is buffer validator. By having a similar enough name, it might make it difficult for the owners of that other application to realize that someone had injected a malicious package in there, versus if they just put like, invisible ferret backdoor as a package, that would stand out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, probably don't use backdoor in your malicious attack. That might give it away. It may not be quite an invisible ferret if you say call it backdoor ferret. By the way, I might be jumping the gun to what you wanted to talk about at the end of this, but as I'm showing people the screen of, if you're watching on YouTube, the real is buffer package versus the fake one is buffer validator. I notice, and it tell me, Mark, this is a function of npm now to kind of help people. Like the real one, there's something called a supply chain security score you can see on the screen. Obviously for the real one it's 100%, but I notice at the very least there's a rating for these fake ones that actually would quickly tell you that this is bad. Is this
Those
something
are
that npm is doing now, or is that coming from some other thing?
it's coming from the good old folks at Socket and
Gotcha.
their
So that
own
is their tool.
integration within it.
I
Yep,
see. So this is what they'll probably pitch at the end. Okay, sorry.
yep,
Keep going. We were talking about, how
exactly.
the
So, like, I think there's a couple different ways they could have used them. It sounds like they didn't actually get a chance to like widely weaponize these. There was only a few dozen to a couple hundred downloads for each of them, which in the
300, something like
past,
that. Yeah,
yeah, we've
total.
seen malicious repositories get thousands or tens of thousands of downloads. When it comes to what they did, it was relatively simple. The initial malicious code is just an info stealer. It gets like information about the system, grabs the login data files from web browsers, tries to grab information from cryptocurrency wallets that are on there, and then sends it to a hard coded web server IP address by encoding it, and then basically just issuing a get request with that information as a parameter. So some of the secondary payloads had additional threats like that invisible ferret backdoor, and then the beaver tail remote access Trojan as well too. So they could have gone after additional. They could have staged this as like an additional, more ongoing threat against developers and or the people that install applications that use these packages as dependencies. And interestingly enough, like at the time where Socket posted this, they had reported them to NPM and GitHub, but all of them were still online, even at the time where I was like gathering my notes the other day on this one too. It took a decent amount of time to take these packages down and offline off the package index. So I think like end of the day, like the same story is still true. It's clear nation state threat actors are targeting software supply chains. And you mentioned a couple of the tactics that they'd used previously around like reviving old repository names or effectively typo squatting. This one, I'm leaning towards they were probably staging it for use in another attack, but it's possible they were just hoping some developer would stumble across these and they'd be able to steal some passwords out of their web browsers and cryptocurrency wallets off their desktop if they ran them. What's the defense tip for this, Corey? Like, I guess just be aware of what you're installing and vet the download count is one option. Use third-party tools to validate the security of these packages.
A
Like,
lot of the repositories have user comments and stuff like that. So look at ones that have a fair amount of user interaction and comments and take a peek at them just to see. I'm sure if there is a bad one, some user will eventually comment on it and warn you. So yeah.
and if you need to validate whether a JavaScript array is empty, maybe just write those 2 lines of code yourself and don't go download a whole damn package for it. I don't know.
Or just vibe code with AI. You can solve it just by AI writes perfect code, right? Mark, it probably won't have vulnerabilities. So just get some AI coder to do the common npm package for you.
You
It can
joke,
check
but
if an array is empty.
Copilot is my new favorite thing these days. It is pretty dang impressive. But like you were being sarcastic about, it does it's not perfect. It introduces broken code in some spots.
That
It
is,
introduces
and to be
vulnerabilities in
honest, I'm
spots.
just doing that for jokes. I actually think it's getting better and better. We've said before, of all the things that AI can do, without flaws like hallucinations and other bad things, I think coding is the one that's the easiest to validate, even secure coding. So I have a feeling AI coding is just going to get better and better and better. It's the one use case that I think you can even use AI to help validate the functionality of code. So I'm not at all
I'm
against AI coding.
I'm personally looking forward to the day where I can like write a Confluence page describing some sort of project I want and then
And
kick it
it's
over to
done for you.
Copilot and it just goes done. Here you go.
Well, you
That
listen to
sounds
some of
great.
our podcast competitors, like the New York Times Hard Fork. I think he vibe coded a lot of personal apps, basically doing what you said,
Yep.
writing a very human prompt, and bam, you got a functional app.
But while we go down this tangent for a second, like, what are your thoughts, Corey? Do you think there's a concern with if you no longer need to be an expert at developing and you're able to just like code whatever you want? Like, what happens if it breaks and you don't know the application enough to know how to troubleshoot it?
I haven't
Like, are
pulled
we
out
gonna?
pop Corey, but you might have heard, like, this is my feeling with people that know assembly versus all these secondary and tertiary languages that turn more into English and separate you from what's really happening. Like what happens if all the the compiler gurus that actually know assembly disappear and everyone's coding in easy human languages? I think the answer to that is really the same with AI coding. Like we do still need people that understand what is happening and can read code and code themselves to check up on AI's results once in a while, or things will happen and break in ways we don't even expect. So I don't know, man. I think an engineer's job is going to change. I think businesses might actually need much less engineers, but I think you better keep some around because I don't think it's going to be perfect all the time.
I don't know if you're gonna get good results of going and yelling at Cortana or Copilot for a mistake versus
What are
an
we going
engineer
to
to go
do?
get
What
it
are
fixed.
CISO offices like us that want to help engineering get to good app security? How do we get the AI to document their significant code changes and adopt OWASP practices? We won't
Well,
have people to
maybe
yell at.
we can just use a separate model for that. I don't know. I'm, for one, am hoping that I automate or AI myself out of a job at some point in the next 10 years. So we'll see.
As long as you
But
still get paid, though, I assume.
universal basic income, I'll go live like a hermit in the woods and be just as happy.
Doesn't seem the way it's
Anyways,
going right now, considering, at least in our country,
no, it does
can't even
not.
have health care anymore, let
Moving
alone Social
on.
Security.
So for the second story, Microsoft's threat intelligence team posted a blog post. It was actually like a couple of weeks ago now, but I thought it was still notable enough to revisit and talk about, where they described a large-scale malvertising campaign that primarily abused GitHub.com as a hosting solution. So they noted since 2024, I think December of 2024, they found first stage malware payloads were being downloaded from malicious GitHub repositories. And when they started investigating, they found that users were arriving to GitHub through a series of other redirections that almost always originated from illegal streaming websites for pirated videos. Basically, the website would embed a malvertising redirector within like the iframes for the actual movies to try and generate like pay-per-view or pay-per-click revenue. It would redirect through one or two malicious redirectors and ultimately end up on other websites, like fake tech support scam websites or just general malware distribution sites, which would then redirect to github.com, where a malware payload was hosted. The
By the way, it
second
goes
stage,
without
yep.
saying for most of our viewers, but iframes are just invisible frames. So they're like that. Think of it as like an invisible pixel on your website that has some code behind it, and that code can go out to other URLs and load things like JavaScript or whatever from other sites, or just redirect you in a you don't know you're being redirected. Like the page that's being rendered to you is that page, but there's like a little invisible pixel that is also loading other pages in the background.
It's like a page within a page.
Yeah, that you can't see.
So the first stage in this case that's downloaded from GitHub was really just like a dropper. So most of the droppers were actually legitimate files that were even digitally signed with a valid digital signature. The attackers used the built-in functionality of these initial droppers to then go download additional stages. There were like various libraries and applications that could decode or install other files. For the second stage, they did a basic like system discovery to try and find information about the user, the operating system, and then exfiltrate that information out as a base64 encoded URL sent to a remote command and control server. And then based off the results of that data exfiltration, so which version of Windows they were on, type of user it was, like sorts of information like that, one of multiple different third stages would be downloaded and installed on the endpoint. All of the third stages, they generally included some form of command and control and additional download capabilities, as well as defense evasion techniques. They had specific payloads like info stealers, like Luma and Duenarium. I can't pronounce that one. Can we start using like monosyllabic payload names from now on? That
I
would be
don't think you
pretty
can
great for me.
pronounce monosyllabic too either. Although is monosyllabic even a word?
Monosyllable
There you go.
ick.
There you go. Monosyllable words.
Why
You
use
pronounced
big
it better
words
than
when
me.
small words do trick? Um,
Corey
so,
Light.
anyways, specific like info stealers, they also had legitimate RMM software like net support that they would install to maintain remote access. They even used some scripts and lolbass, living off the library binaries and scripts to do effectively living off the land or even fileless attacks. Microsoft's blog post on this is actually really long, and they go into
Okay.
some in-depth analysis of like the PowerShell scripts they were using, and even the third and fourth stages, and some of the specific indicators of compromise and techniques they were using. If you're a nerd like us, I definitely recommend finding this post because they go into immense detail and all of the techniques they were seeing. But like the high level stat or takeaway from this was they saw that this had infected up to 1 million devices through this campaign, which is a pretty dang big number for a malware attack these days. There's a couple takeaways from that. First, there's a lot of people pirating videos out there that don't know how to do it safely.
Or not even pirating, just well, they're still pirating, but they're watching on a streaming site. They're not even trying to download it.
Yeah. I guess the next time you try and catch like a Arsenal Champions League game, make sure you do it through a legitimate service and not through.
Should we write like a white research paper on how to safely pirate videos without messing up your security, or would that be bad?
Something tells me our council would not appreciate that
Yeah,
type
yeah,
of blog
yeah.
post.
I gotta say, if you're going to pirate something, you better have good security practices and understand what to look for.
Yep. 100%, because otherwise you'd end up as one of these systems.
Or you can just download every key generator you see and every KMS system you see because they're always safe, right? Totally, completely safe. Who would put anything extra in a key generator or a KMS server?
I know you're joking, but like if you look at the endpoint section for our internet security report,
It's
like
a
quarter
common
after
vector.
quarter after quarter, when we look at the PUPs, like the potentially unwanted programs, like auto KMS and other key generators are the number one and usually like the number two and number three on the top PUPs list by like a pretty sizable margin. There's a lot of people that, I mean, they have a legitimate copy of our EPDR endpoint protection or 8360, I guess, but they're downloading key generators on those machines, which is very interesting spread there. But I get it. The economy's tough, and maybe you can afford endpoint protection, but not a Windows license.
We
Pretty
have
nuts.
Windows. Microsoft audits us, so we don't do that crap.
Yes, they do. And then like the last thing was, so all this was hosted off of GitHub repositories, which are free to create. All you need is an email address to go sign up for one. You can start uploading code. You can upload source code. You can upload packages. They have like package repository features built into GitHub now too. Like they're a really powerful source for storing data and code and applications. And it's also a legitimate domain. Like most organizations probably can't block github.com as a domain, which means downloading stuff from there could potentially get past some of your defenses if you're not like inspecting all traffic through the
Yeah, and
perimeter.
it's like a lot of time when we're talking about these legitimate sites that can be leveraged for malware, like SharePoint, for instance. We talk about how, or at least I do, that the vendor should be the one that cleans those sites. But it's a bit more complicated with GitHub because GitHub is also a great source of, blue hat, like good guy pen testing tools. I like that the research community can post, you know, power exploit, for instance, and host it on GitHub, even though it literally is like malicious PowerShell scripts. I think it's good for the research community and security experts to have access to that. So it's one of, besides being a legitimate site that you may not worry about if you saw it at first. I think it's a little harder for GitHub to try to scrub it of this malicious stuff quickly because beyond the pure malicious stuff, there's a lot of, kind of gray hat or white hat community stuff that could get scrubbed away.
It almost seems like they need to wait for it to be used in an attack before they can remove it. Like
Yeah.
there's legitimate reasons to have like proof of concept exploits up on GitHub, even though Microsoft has been taking a stronger stance against those lately too.
Yeah.
And like, what's the difference between a proof of concept for a researcher and something that's been weaponized in a malware attack? It's like
Sometimes
it's put
nothing.
into use. Yeah. So
Uh,
it seems very difficult for them to, like you said, police GitHub.com, which I think is why it may be a popular target for threat actors. Like I guess maybe I'm sure they've already thought of all this and they probably are using things, but like brand new accounts that are now hosting an
yeah.
executable, like those are enough red
It's a
flags
better
to
way.
look at something
It's kind
suspicious.
of like how DNS registrars must try to figure out the next bad domain. Since a lot of them are random, they can't just guess by the domain name, but they can pay attention to the way they're registered and by who and so I could see that being a good thing on GitHub, just paying attention to new accounts or if they see ones being an email being used a lot or whatever. Although you'd
Yep.
hope sophisticated actors would create new emails every time.
I'd hope they wouldn't, but I know they probably
Well,
do.
yeah, if they want to get away with it, but I get your point. Us good guys
Yep.
hope they're dumb.
But either way, very successful attack with a million infected devices over just a couple of months. But the whole point of this post was Microsoft describing what they succeeded in taking down. So hats off to them. Moving on to the last story, though, this one's interesting where normally we'd be talking about this as like an attack that someone spotted in the wild. In this case, this is like a pure research post from the folks at
On Medium.
SquareX. Yeah, exactly.
They didn't
Where
even
they
post it on their
published
own site.
exactly. The folks at SquareX published this research post last week about a pretty novel browser extension attack that they're calling polymorphic extensions. This isn't something that they've seen in the wild. It's just something they realized could potentially be a problem. And the post is pretty interesting. Basically, they claim they found a way for a malicious extension to silently impersonate any extension installed on the victim's browser and create a pixel perfect replica of everything from like the target's icon, the pop-up window, any workflows, and it can even temporarily disable the legitimate extension itself. So in their like hypothetical attack they described, it requires tricking a victim first into installing the malicious extension, which it is a barrier, but it's not a super high barrier. We've seen time and time again how unfortunately easy it can be to trick folks into installing fake extensions or malicious extensions hosted in the
Basic
Google
social
Store.
engineering techniques would definitely work.
So in their proof of concept, they disguised it as a AI marketing tool, which I thought was a clever disguise because anything with AI is a great way to get unsuspecting people to download it. The extension does require permissions to read browser history and to manage other apps, extensions, and themes. But both of those permission grants are only labeled as medium risk by Chromium. They're not like high risk ones like full control would potentially be. During installation, there's even a little pop-up that appears that prompts the user to pin the extension for a better experience. That is one of the prerequisites for this one. If you're a Chromium user, you can only see like a half dozen or so extensions in the upper right if you pin them. So this is to add that to that list. So next, the malicious extension needs to find a way to find out what other installed extensions there are. Google, or Chromium, I guess, actually bans direct monitoring of other extensions through their APIs, but there's a few different ways they found they could do it anyway. One is to use just the Chrome Management API, which is used by administrative tools to manage installed extensions in the browser. And the second is to use something called web resource hitting, where basically it identifies the presence of a unique web resource that is associated with a known target. So for example, if you found a PNG, like an image file with 1Password's logo in it, that's a sign that the 1Password password manager is installed in that browser because it will inject that into pages or inject it into the HTML to pop up the password manager as you're using it. Malicious extensions
By the
can...
way,
Yep.
I found it interesting that it's funny that legitimate sites for marketing, like I hope our VP of marketing doesn't hear this, but marketing can be kind of shady with the stuff they want to learn about you. I mean, sure, they're doing it for non-malicious reasons, but they can be shady trying to track you. And they found this second technique because it's what LinkedIn uses to catch certain things that extensions might do that mess with privacy rules. So I guess in this case, LinkedIn is using it for a good reason to make sure marketing and other robots can't scrape their site for information. But it's just interesting to me how semi-legitimate things that other fancy web apps figure out how to do to kind of game a system to get information can also be used for malicious things like this too.
Yep. So they mentioned the malicious extension can inject a script into any web page to check for other installed extensions. The results are then sent back to the attacker's server where it processes them. And then if a target is identified, the attack proceeds. Otherwise, this malicious extension just stays dormant until one of the targeted extensions shows up in the victim's browser. So when it does proceed, though, it starts by temporarily disabling the target extension. So like turning off 1Password password manager, for example. It then replicates the targeted extension's icon in the pinned extension bar. So basically, if you're not paying close attention, or if you are paying close attention, you would see its icon changes from that AI marketing tool to the 1Password icon. It then puts a pop up that tells the victim that they've been logged out of their password manager, for example, and they need to log back in. When they go to click the fake 1Password icon for this extension, pops up a window that looks just like the normal 1Password login form. The victim would presumably put in their email and secret key and password in order to unlock their vault. All of that information gets stolen and sent off to the attacker's servers. But in the background, the malicious extension closes itself, re-enables 1Password, changes its own icon back to its AI marketing one, and the legitimate 1Password extension then autofills the page with the username and password for the login form. So basically, it sits there like a chameleon and like turns into different extensions as the victim would be using one of those extensions to steal information. Some other potential targets were like cryptocurrency wallets. You can imagine if you go to sign a transaction with your Ethereum wallet, it could hijack that and steal your crypto keys or force you to sign a fake transaction. Banking applications, talked about grammar checkers. Like if you upload or review a document with a grammar checker, it could steal the contents of that document. All of these are potential targets. So this hasn't been seen out in the wild at all, but I thought it was like, this seems practical, like it could actually happen. Like social engineering is a relatively low bar to get someone to install one of these. And there aren't a lot of really good built-in mechanisms. Some of the ones they recommended.
I mean, they essentially said for like Chrome, you're just screwed. This is part of the way they do extensions, and they hope Chrome does something to ban abrupt extension to ban other extensions from being able to mess with other extension icons. But right now, you're toast.
Basically, they said like Chrome should ban or flag like if an icon changes rapidly in extension, or like the HTML changes, or like implement a notification to the user if any of that happens. Like, hey, this extension just changed its name and its icon. Like those would all be potential solutions for this, but like there are
they should also vet
needs.
their store, by the way, in the same way Google Play and Apple vet their, like, I do think they already are on the lookout for malicious extensions being uploaded. So they have a new type of malicious extension they should watch for on their stores.
Yep. But the one of the permissions that it needs, the manage other extensions and apps, like that's a legitimate permission that you would want some of your extensions to have. So it's difficult to just like remove that entirely. So I think this is going to be a pretty difficult problem to solve for end users. Now, obviously, SquareX pitched their own product as a solution for this, of maintaining your browser security.
Here's a problem that doesn't exist in the wild yet, but we just told the whole world about, so buy our product so people don't exploit what we just told the whole world about.
Perfectly summarized. But it was like objectively interesting research. This is a novel way of targeting web browsers now. I'd say a little sarcastically, as the one Firefox user in the world, I'm assuming I'm perfectly safe from anything like this because it was entirely based around Chromium browsers like Chrome, Edge, and Brave. But I suspect a similar style of attack would work.
Never ever has flaws.
No, they do not.
Okay. Nation states have never figured out how to use even the secure version of Firefox and Tor browser to identify people using Tor. That's certainly never happened because it's so secure, man.
I'm just trying to keep their like 0.5% of market share alive, so there's a little bit of competition. Because
that is a fair point.
I don't want to live in a world where Google controls the entirety of the web browsing ecosystem,
or any company owns the entirety of anything.
Exactly. So everyone join me, install Firefox, help maintain competition.
Is Brave Chromium based? Probably.
It is Chromium
That's a
based.
bummer.
Yep.
Why do all the good things have to be sold out?
Yeah. It's okay. I intentionally live with a slightly inferior product just for the sake of that principle. But to everyone else, be mindful of the extensions you're installing because they could really ruin your day. And I don't know, maybe look at some tools to help defend
Or
against them
just
too.
YOLO and click on everything on the internet for fun. YOLO,
The
after all.
2002 approach to browsing the internet.
Yeah.
What could possibly
Is
go
it
wrong?
that far away? 2002? My gosh.
That's
Millennials are old now.
about the time when I was YOLO clicking around everything on the internet. Um, Back when I'd have to reinstall the entire Windows operating system on like a bi-monthly basis to clean up whatever mess I had created. Yep. But hey, now we've got tools to help protect us. Just, I don't know, don't install garbage and you'll be fine. The end.
So stay away from Mark's GitHub.
Hey, my GitHub is perfectly safe for the most part if you know what you're doing. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you did not enjoy today's episode, send your feedback to Corey. He'll handle it personally. If you have any suggestions for future episode topics or questions on today's topics, that's out of order, but we'll go with it anyway. You can reach out to us on Blue Sky. I'm at itsmark.me, Corey's at SecAdept. And we're also both at Instagram at watchguard_technologies. Thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us next week. Okay, bye.
Bye.